Don't you dare! You're not going to try to steal your sister's credit, my mom yelled, her voice echoing through the living room. I sat there stunned, my face burning of rage. It was Christmas Eve at my parents' house. Just me, my sister Olivia, who was out getting candy, our parents, and my cousin Nina. The tree was lit up, the scent of pine and cinnamon filled the room, and yet all I could feel was the weight of their judgment crushing me. My name is Sophie, I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the afterthought in my own family. My sister Olivia, the golden child, could walk on water as far as my parents were concerned. Meanwhile, I couldn't even breathe without them finding something to criticize. But this time, it wasn't just words, it was about the truth. Since July, I had been quietly sending my parents money every month to help with their bills, but Olivia had taken all the credit, and my parents believed her without question. When I finally tried to tell them the truth, my mom shut me down like I was some liar looking for attention. I didn't know what to say after that. My throat felt tight, and all the words I wanted to scream just stuck there. Nina, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. "Wait a second," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. "How do you even know Olivia's sending the money? Have you ever seen proof of it?" My parents looked at her like she had grown a second head. My dad waved his hand dismissively. "Of course Olivia wouldn't lie about something like that. She's been the responsible one since day one." Responsible. That word felt like a slap to my face. I'd spent the last 6 months tightening my own budget just to help them out, skipping dinners out with friends and saying no to things I really wanted. All because I thought it was the right thing to do. But no matter what I did, Olivia always managed to swoop in and make me look like the selfish one. Just as I was about to respond, the front door opened, and Olivia waltzed in, a bag of candy swinging from her hand. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice annoyingly cheerful, as if she hadn't just walked into the middle of a storm. She took one look at my mom's flushed face and my clenched fists and immediately put on her innocent act, tilting her head like she had no idea what was happening. "You need to explain to your sister," my mom said, pointing a shaky finger at me. "She's trying to claim she's been helping us financially when we all know it's been you." Olivia froze for a moment, her eyes darting to me, then to Nina, before putting on her most saccharine smile. "Oh, Mom," she said with a laugh, setting the candy on the counter. "I'm sure Sophie just misunderstood." She turned to me, her expression dripping with fake concern. "You know I've been handling this for months now. I didn't want to burden you with it." I stared at her, absolutely floored by her audacity. "Misunderstood?" I said, my voice trembling. "I've been sending them money since July, every single month, and you knew that, Olivia. Don't you dare act like this was all a mix-up." Nina crossed her arms, glaring at Olivia. "Yeah, Olivia. Care to explain why you've been so quiet about it all this time?" Olivia's fake smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly, brushing her hair behind her ear like nothing had happened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've been helping out because, unlike you, I actually care about Mom and Dad's well-being." That was it. I felt something snap inside me. "Are you serious right now?" I shot back, standing up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You've been letting them believe a lie for months, Olivia. You knew I was the one sending the money, but you just sat there and let them think it was you. Why? So you could play the hero?" Nina stepped in before things got even more heated. "Hold on," she said, raising her hand like a referee. "There's an easy way to settle this. Did Olivia ever actually show you proof that she was sending the money? Bank statements, screenshots, anything?" My parents exchanged awkward glances, and my mom stammered, "Well, no, but we didn't think we needed to." Olivia said she was doing it. Olivia whipped around to face Nina, her smile now replaced with a glare. "You're out of place here, Nina," she snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. "This is a family matter, and frankly, You don't know the first thing about what's been going on. Nina didn't back down. Oh, I think I know enough, she shot back, her tone icy. I've watched you bask in the praise for something you didn't even do, Olivia. You've been feeding them lies, and you know it. Olivia let out a sarcastic laugh, shaking her head. You're unbelievable, she muttered, pulling out her phone. Fine, if you want proof, here. She scrolled through her files, then held the screen up to my parents. See? These are the receipts for the transfers I've been making, every month like clockwork. My mom's face softened as she glanced at the PDFs, but I knew better. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Let me see those, I said, snatching the phone from her hand before she could protest. The receipts looked convincing. Her name, the amounts, even the transaction IDs. But something about them felt off. I turned to Nina, who leaned over to look with me. This is a lie! I exploded, my voice shaking the walls. The room went dead silent, but I couldn't stop. You faked these, Olivia. Don't act like you've been sending them money when you haven't sent a single dime. My chest heaved as I glared at her, daring her to deny it. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not this time. Nina, who had been so sharp just moments ago, suddenly stepped back, looking uncomfortable. I don't know. Maybe I went too far, she muttered, avoiding Olivia's glare. She wasn't going to take sides anymore, not with the tension this high. Olivia just smirked, holding her phone close to her chest like it was some kind of shield. Fine, I snapped, pulling out my own phone. You want proof? I'll show you my bank statements right now. My hands shook as I opened my banking app, only for the screen to freeze. No, I muttered under my breath, tapping furiously. It wasn't working. I closed it, reopened it, and tried again. Nothing. Come on, I hissed, panic rising in my chest. It's not working. How convenient, Olivia said smugly, her arms crossed. The one time you need to prove something, your phone just doesn't work. Sounds legit, Sophie. Enough, my dad roared, standing up and towering over me. You've embarrassed yourself enough already. If you can't back up your story, you owe your sister an apology. Right now. His tone was cold, final. And if you don't, you can pack your things and leave. I'm not letting you ruin Christmas with your jealousy. I froze, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Apologize? For what? I spat, my voice cracking. For telling the truth? For being tired of living in her shadow? My dad just pointed to the door. You have 5 minutes to decide. I didn't wait. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the freezing night, slamming the door behind me. Tears blurred my vision as I made my way to my car. I had never felt so small, so lost. Christmas was supposed to be about family, but all I could feel was how little I belonged in mine. I drove aimlessly through the dark, my tears blurring the Christmas lights strung along the streets. My mind was racing, replaying the confrontation over and over. How could Olivia do this? How could my parents believe her without a second thought? I didn't even realize where I was going until I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour coffee shop. The bright lights inside felt oddly out of place against the stillness of the night. I grabbed my phone and slid into a booth, still trembling with anger and humiliation. My banking app stared back at me, useless. Every time I tried to log in, I got the same frustrating message. We're experiencing a major technical issue. All services, including ATMs, are temporarily unavailable. We're working to resolve this as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience. Patience? I needed proof now. I refreshed the app again and again, as if sheer willpower could force it to work, but it was no use. The universe really had it out for me tonight. An hour passed. I was still staring at my phone, empty coffee cups scattered around me, when a message popped up. It was Nina. Hey, are you okay? I've been thinking, and if you need a place to crash, my door's open. I'm not sure what to believe right now, but you've always been honest with me. Let me know. For the first time that night, I let out a shaky breath. Nina believed me, or at least part of her did. She was torn, and I couldn't blame her. Olivia's so-called proof had been convincing enough, and with my app down, I had nothing but my word to fight back. Still, her message gave me a small glimmer of hope. At least someone wasn't completely against me. My parents lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone else's business. I'd only come back for the holidays, hoping for a quiet Christmas with family. Instead, I found myself driving through empty streets to Nina's house, clutching the steering wheel as if it could hold me together. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already at the door, wrapped in a blanket and holding a mug of tea. "Come in," she said softly, her expression a mix of worry and hesitation. I stepped inside, and she didn't press me to talk right away. She just handed me a mug and led me to the couch, where I finally let out the breath I'd been holding since I walked out of my parents' house. "I'm not lying, Nina," I said after a few minutes of silence. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep going. "I swear to you, I've been sending them money every month since July. Olivia knew, and she let them think it was her. Those receipts she showed? They're fake. I know they are." Nina nodded slowly, still unsure. "I believe you," she said hesitantly, "but you have to admit, it doesn't look great right now, especially with the app not working. It's like the perfect storm." "I know," I whispered, my frustration boiling over. "But tomorrow, if the bank system is back up, I'll show them the proof. I'm not stepping foot in that house for Christmas Day unless I can prove Olivia's been lying." Nina sat back, looking thoughtful. "Everyone's going to be there tomorrow," she said quietly. "Your parents, Olivia, the whole family. If you walk in with proof, there's no way she can weasel her way out of it." "Exactly," I said firmly. "I'm not going to let her keep making me the bad guy. Not anymore." Nina gave me a small, encouraging smile. "Well, you can stay here as long as you need to. And tomorrow, let's hope the bank system is back up." The next morning, I woke up feeling a sliver of hope, thinking maybe, just maybe, the universe had decided to cut me some slack. But as I reached for my phone and opened the bank app, my stomach dropped. The same message stared back at me. "We're still experiencing a major technical issue. Services remain unavailable. Thank you for your patience." I groaned, running a hand through my messy hair. "Still down," I muttered, tossing the phone onto the bedside table. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing for alternatives. How was I supposed to prove anything without access to my account? Nina knocked softly on the door before peeking in. "Morning," she said, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Her face fell when she saw mine. "Still no luck?" I shook my head, taking the mug from her. "Nothing. I don't know what to do, Nina. I can't just walk in there with my word against Olivia's. They'll never believe me." She sat down beside me, tucking her legs under her. "There's got to be another way," she said, thinking out loud. "Can you call your bank? Maybe they can verify the transfers over the phone?" I considered it for a moment but knew it wouldn't work. Even if I called the bank, my parents weren't going to let me sit there on the phone in front of them. They'd just dismiss it as another excuse. Besides, it was Christmas Day and all the bank branches were closed. I tried calling their customer service line anyway, but all I got was an automated message. "We are experiencing high call volumes due to a technical issue. Please try again later." I hung up, frustration boiling over. Everyone must have been calling for the same reason, and now I was completely stuck. "I have to think of another way," I muttered, more to myself than to Nina. "I can't just show up empty-handed." Sitting at Nina's kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee cup, I felt completely stuck. Every option seemed like a dead end. "There has to be a way," I mumbled, more to myself than to Nina, who was scrolling on her phone nearby. Something Olivia didn't think of when she faked those receipts. I picked up my phone for the 100th time, scrolling aimlessly through apps and emails, hoping for inspiration. That's when it hit me. The emails. Every time I made a transfer to my parents, I got an automatic confirmation email from the bank. Those wouldn't be tied to the app or the bank's current technical issues. I nearly dropped my phone as I scrambled to search my inbox. It didn't take long. There they were, clear as day. Monthly email confirmations from July through December, showing the exact amounts I'd transferred, and the same account numbers linked to my parents. "Nina!" I practically shouted, spinning my phone around for her to see. "Look at this, the emails, they're all here. It's all the proof I need." Relief and determination flooded through me at the same time. Nina's eyes widened as she read over the emails, her face breaking into a smile. "You've got her now," she said, her voice steady with confidence. "There's no way Olivia can talk her way out of this." I nodded, my resolve firm. "I'm going to that house, but only with this proof in hand. If she tries to deny it, I'll show them these emails right in front of everyone." For the first time in hours, I felt like I had control again. Olivia's lies were about to unravel, and this time, I wouldn't let her get away with it. As I stared at the confirmation emails, a wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a twinge of embarrassment. How had I not thought of this earlier? It was so obvious. But then again, I hadn't been thinking clearly since last night. I'd been too overwhelmed by the fight, the accusations, and the sheer humiliation of being called a liar in front of everyone. My mind had been spinning in 100 directions, and honestly, I was just trying to hold it together. "God," I muttered, shaking my head at myself. "I feel so stupid for not checking my email sooner. It's been sitting there this whole time." Nina reached over and squeezed my arm. "Don't beat yourself up," she said gently. "You've been through a lot in the past 24 hours. It's no wonder you didn't think of it right away. The important thing is that you found it now." Her reassurance helped ease some of the shame, though I still felt a little silly. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming next. "Okay," I said, sitting up straighter. "I've got the proof. I'm going over there and I'm setting the record straight. If they still don't believe me after this, then that's on them." Nina nodded, her expression firm. "I've got your back, Sophie. Let's go show them the truth." I pulled into my parents' driveway, gripping the steering wheel for a moment before stepping out. The sight of the house, decorated with twinkling lights and a cheerful wreath on the door, felt like a cruel joke. I wasn't here to celebrate. I was here to expose the truth. Nina gave me a small nod of encouragement before we both walked up to the door. My mom opened it, her face tight with disapproval. "So, you decided to come back," she said, her tone sharp enough to make me flinch. Behind her, Olivia was leaning casually against the wall, smirking. "Did you come to apologize, Sophie?" she asked, her voice dripping with mockery. My dad stood further back, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather slam the door in my face. "I just want to celebrate Christmas with the family," I said softly, forcing my voice to sound apologetic. "I don't want any more drama." My mom narrowed her eyes but stepped aside to let me in. Olivia let out a little snort as I passed her, whispering just loud enough for me to hear, "Took you long enough to come crawling back." I clenched my fist but kept my face neutral. Let her think I'd given up. Let them all think I was just here to grovel and move on. I played along, smiling faintly and staying out of the way as the house slowly filled with relatives. Cousins, aunts, uncles, they all greeted me warmly, none of them aware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. As we sat down for dinner, I felt my heart pounding in anticipation. I knew Olivia couldn't resist bringing up last night. It was only a matter of time before she used the moment to paint herself as the victim and me as the villain. All I had to do was wait and make sure my proof was ready. It didn't take long for Olivia to seize the spotlight. As we all sat around the table, passing dishes and exchanging polite conversation, she cleared her throat dramatically. "Well," she began, glancing at me with a smirk, "I think we all need to address the elephant in the room." The table went silent, all eyes turning toward her. She leaned back in her chair, feigning a look of concern. "You know, last night was really tough for me," she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. "I mean, I never thought Sophie could stoop so low as to accuse me of lying. It was honestly heartbreaking." My stomach twisted as whispers spread around the table. A few relatives were already glancing at me with disapproval, while others seemed too stunned to react. Olivia wasn't done. "I've always tried to be there for this family," she continued, laying it on thick. "Sending money every month to help Mom and Dad, never asking for recognition. And for her to turn around and call me a liar in front of everyone? It's beyond hurtful." Her performance was flawless, tears threatening to spill, voice shaking just enough to sound sincere. My parents nodded along, my mom looking particularly wounded. "You didn't deserve that, Olivia," she said, her voice firm. "We've always known you were the responsible one." The room filled with murmurs of agreement, and I felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. My cousins and aunts stared at me like I was the worst person in the world. I gripped my phone under the table, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had waited for this moment, but now that it was here, the pressure was suffocating. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands under the table as Olivia continued her act. When she finally paused, dabbing at her dry eyes with a napkin, I seized the moment. "That's enough," I said, my voice calm but firm. Every head turned to me, some with surprise, others with outright disdain. I stood, gripping my phone tightly. "You've had your chance to talk, Olivia. Now it's my turn." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, here we go again." I ignored her and addressed the table instead. "I've been sending Mom and Dad money every month since July. I don't use fancy speeches, and I don't ask for recognition. But when Olivia stood there last night, claiming she was the one doing it, I couldn't stay quiet, and now I can prove it." I held up my phone, showing the email confirmations I'd found. "These are my receipts. They come directly from my bank. They show every transfer I made to Mom and Dad's account, along with the exact dates and amounts." Olivia leaned back, smirking. "Oh, please," she said, waving me off. "Anyone can fake an email these days. You really expect everyone to believe that? My receipts came straight from the app." "They're not fake," I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "And if you're so confident, let's check the dates. Mom, Dad, did you bother to check the transfer dates on Olivia's receipts last night? Because I'll bet they don't match mine." My parents exchanged uneasy glances. My dad shifted in his chair, scratching his chin. "We didn't check," he admitted. "We just assumed, and we don't use the bank app on our phones." "You just assumed she was telling the truth," I finished for him, my voice sharp. "You trusted her without a second thought, but now you have a chance to see for yourselves." I crossed my arms, daring Olivia to interrupt. "Let's go and check your ATM statements. They show the account numbers for every deposit. You don't need bank apps for that." Olivia's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Fine," she snapped. "Let them check. I have nothing to hide." My parents hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's Christmas," my mom said weakly. "Do we really have to—" "Yes," I interrupted, my voice unwavering. "We do." Reluctantly, my dad grabbed his coat and the three of us left for the nearest ATM. The cold night air bit at my skin as we drove in tense silence. At the ATM, my dad pulled out his card and accessed the transaction history. Slowly, he scrolled through the dates, matching them to the statements on my phone. The moment of truth came when he clicked into the details of a July deposit. It displayed the bank account number, and it matched mine. He checked August, September. Every single one lined up perfectly with the emails I'd shown them. My mom stared at the screen, her face pale. "It's Sophie's account," she whispered, barely audible. "Every one of these transfers came from Sophie. Olivia actually took the time to fake her statements just in case we would ask one day." When we pulled back into the driveway, the atmosphere in the car was thick with tension. My parents hadn't said a word the entire ride home, their faces a mix of shame and disbelief. As we walked into the house, the murmurs of conversation in the living room came to an abrupt halt. All eyes turned toward us. the weight of the situation pressing down on everyone. And then, we saw Olivia. She was by the door, furiously throwing on her coat and clutching her purse. Her face was flushed, her confident smirk replaced by a panicked, guilty expression. "Olivia," my dad said firmly, stepping forward, "we checked the statements. Every transfer came from Sophie's account. You've been lying to us." The room erupted into hushed gasps. A few relatives exchanged awkward glances, clearly embarrassed to have believed her. One by one, they started gathering their things, mumbling hurried goodbyes as they shuffled toward the door. Olivia's facade finally cracked. She let out a bitter laugh, tears streaming down her face. "Fine," she snapped, spinning around to face us. "Yes, I lied, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I lied." She glared at me, her voice trembling with frustration. "You told me back in July that you didn't want a big deal made about sending them money, that you just wanted to help quietly. So I thought, what's the harm in letting them think it was me? They already see me as the responsible one anyway." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I told you because I trusted you," I said, my voice shaking. "I thought maybe, for once, you'd support me. Instead, you used it to make yourself look good while I was left feeling invisible. Do you even realize how humiliating this has been for me?" Olivia's expression softened for a brief moment, but she quickly turned defensive again. "They were never going to believe you over me, Sophie," she said bitterly. I didn't think it would blow up like this." My mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Why, Olivia? Why would you do this? We would have been grateful to either of you for helping. There was no reason for this." Olivia didn't respond. She grabbed her keys and stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of her actions sinking in. My parents turned to me, their faces filled with regret. "Sophie," my dad began, his voice heavy, "we owe you an apology, a huge one. We should have listened to you, but we didn't. And we're sorry." My mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We've treated you unfairly for so long, and this was inexcusable. I don't know if we can ever make it up to you, but we'll try. I promise." I stood there, taking in their words, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive them, but another part still ached from years of being overlooked. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally, my voice quiet. "But this doesn't erase everything. It's going to take time." They nodded solemnly, and for the first time, I felt like they truly understood. The night ended quietly after that, with the house emptied of guests and the three of us sitting in the lingering aftermath. It wasn't the Christmas I had hoped for, but at least for once the truth was out, and I wasn't the bad guy anymore.
I'm Luna, a 28-year-old small business owner living in Chicago. I've decided to share my story, hoping it might resonate with others who've faced similar challenges. This journey began 3 years ago, and though I've found some resolution, the emotional impact lingers. Let me take you through the pivotal moments of my life with Ryan, my now ex-husband, and the turbulent times we endured. I first met Ryan through mutual friends, and our connection was instant. He was charming, wealthy, and lived a life of luxury. Our relationship was vibrant and filled with joy. Ryan's affluence allowed him to be incredibly generous, showering me with gifts and making me feel cherished. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. We dated for 3 wonderful years before tying the knot. Ryan's financial stability meant he was always the one treating me to lavish dinners, designer clothes, and extravagant trips. While I appreciated his kindness, I often felt uneasy about the imbalance in our financial contributions. My salary from my small business wasn't anywhere near what Ryan made, and though he insisted it was normal for him to spoil me, I couldn't shake off the feeling of inadequacy. When we decided to move in together, Ryan reassured me that he had inherited a house from his family, so there was no need to worry about rent. Instead, we agreed to split the other expenses equally. I was both relieved and nervous. I wanted to contribute fairly, but was unsure if I could keep up with his lifestyle. Ryan's confidence in our arrangement, coupled with his generous nature, eventually put me at ease. Our first major challenge came when I had to meet Ryan's family. He was busy with work commitments and couldn't join them, so I was left to host his parents and sister on my own. Ryan had warned me about his family's judgmental tendencies, but I wasn't prepared for how uncomfortable their visit would be. Ryan's mother, Helen, was particularly harsh. From the moment they arrived at our Chicago home, it was clear she didn't approve of me. Her disapproval was palpable, and she wasted no time expressing it. "So you're the woman Ryan has been seeing?" Helen asked with a critical tone. "I must say, I didn't expect you to live in this house. Do you even contribute to the household expenses?" I tried to explain, the house is fully paid for, but we split all other bills evenly. I hoped to clear up any misunderstandings, but Helen quickly dismissed my explanation. "Just because the house is paid for doesn't mean you're not taking advantage of him. Remember, this is his house, not yours." The conversation grew increasingly uncomfortable as Helen and Ryan's father, Frank, continued to criticize me. Frank, though less vocal, seemed to share his wife's sentiments. Ryan's sister, Nina, who was married to a wealthy billionaire, also joined in the disapproval. Her disdain was apparent, and whenever I tried to engage her in conversation, she responded with irritation. Despite my efforts to bridge the gap, Nina only seemed interested in one-upping me with her tales of luxury. "I'm married to a billionaire," she'd say with a smirk. "It's a different world compared to this." The visit left me feeling isolated and disheartened. Ryan's lack of support was glaring. Whenever his family criticized me, he'd brush it off, suggesting that they meant well and that I was overreacting. This dismissal only compounded my feelings of discomfort. Months later, we planned an engagement party in New York. I was excited but apprehensive about how Ryan's family would react. Despite our agreement to split the expenses, his family's criticism of my spending continued. Helen's harsh comments about my expenditures only added to the growing tension. Ryan's failure to stand up for me during this time made me question whether our relationship could withstand the strain. At the engagement party, the atmosphere was strained. Helen's criticism was relentless, targeting everything from the cost of the party to my spending habits. "You shouldn't have splurged so much," she remarked sharply. "It's as if you're draining Ryan's account before you're even married. At this rate, you'll end up with a backyard wedding." Ryan didn't defend me. Instead, he seemed to align himself with his family's viewpoint. This made me feel even more alienated and unsupported. Despite our agreement to split the costs, the criticism from Ryan's family and his inability to stand up for me were deeply hurtful. The turning point came during a special dinner celebrating Ryan's recent promotion. We had planned a grand event to mark the occasion, hoping to lift our spirits after all the tension. I had arranged everything meticulously, wanting the night to be perfect. But as the evening unfolded, it became clear that the underlying issues were far from resolved. Helen took the opportunity during her speech to publicly humiliate me. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Ryan's success," she began. "But it's unfortunate that his good fortune didn't extend to his choice of partner. It's clear that he's been supporting a leech, and it's a shame that he has to work so hard to maintain her lavish lifestyle." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was devastated, feeling as though my worst fears had been confirmed. Ryan's agreement with his mother's accusations and his own remarks about his financial strain pushed me to my breaking point. The public humiliation was the last straw. The night of Ryan's promotion dinner was a pivotal moment, one that left me feeling utterly betrayed and humiliated. As Helen's words echoed in the room, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The term leech was harsh and cruel, and it wasn't just the insult that hurt, it was the fact that Ryan seemed to agree with her. The weight of that public humiliation became unbearable. After Helen's degrading remarks, I tried to keep my composure. I forced a smile and engaged in light conversation, but inside, I was crushed. Ryan, on the other hand, avoided eye contact and said little. The evening that was supposed to celebrate his success had turned into a showcase of how alienated and unsupported I felt. When we got home, I confronted Ryan. "How could you let your mother speak to me like that?" I demanded. My voice shook with emotion. "And how could you agree with her?" Ryan looked uncomfortable but offered a weak explanation. "I don't know what you want me to say, Luna. My family is, well, they are who they are. I can't always control them. But you could have stood up for me." I insisted. "You're my husband. I need you to defend me, not side with them." Ryan's response was dismissive. I didn't want to make things worse. "You know how my family can be." That night, I lay awake, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a disagreement. It was a deep-seated issue with no easy resolution. The support I had hoped for from Ryan seemed non-existent, and his alignment with his family's views only compounded my distress. The days following the dinner were tense. Ryan was distant and avoided discussing the incident. Instead, he buried himself in work, leaving me to navigate the fallout on my own. I tried to reach out to him, to talk through our issues, but each attempt was met with indifference. It was during this time that I sought solace from my mother. She had always been my rock, offering unwavering support through my life's ups and downs. I visited her in Denver, hoping that a change of scenery and some maternal comfort would help me clear my head. My mother listened patiently as I poured out my heart. "Luna, you don't deserve to be treated this way," she said gently. "I've always known you to be strong and capable. If you're unhappy, you need to take action. You can't let anyone, not even Ryan, make you feel less than you are." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. She encouraged me to think about what I truly wanted and reminded me of my worth. With her support, I began to seriously consider my options. Back in Chicago, I started taking concrete steps to address my situation. I began the process of divorce, though it was a difficult and emotional decision. The thought of ending my marriage was daunting, but the lack of support from Ryan and his family had become too much to bear. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Ryan's behavior grew more erratic. He began to harass me, making the separation process even more challenging. His attempts to undermine my confidence and make me feel guilty for leaving only reinforced my resolve to move on. To escape the constant tension, I decided to relocate. I found a small, cozy house in Denver and began preparing for a fresh start. The move was both liberating and overwhelming. I was leaving behind not just a city, but a life that had become fraught with emotional turmoil. In the midst of packing up my belongings, I also made the difficult decision to resign from my job. My small business, which had been a source of pride and stability, needed my full attention. It was time to focus on nurturing it and rediscovering my independence. The separation was tough, and the harassment from Ryan continued to haunt me, but the support from my mother and the promise of a new beginning helped me persevere. The journey was far from over, but I felt a growing sense of hope and determination as I prepared to start anew. Starting over in Denver was both exhilarating and daunting. The change of scenery was a welcome shift from the oppressive environment I had left behind, but the reality of rebuilding my life was setting in. The process of divorcing Ryan was underway, and each step felt like a small victory in my journey toward reclaiming my independence. My new home, a quaint house on the outskirts of Denver, became my sanctuary. It was modest but cozy, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the house I had shared with Ryan. As I unpacked boxes and arranged my belongings, I felt a sense of empowerment. For the first time in a long while, I was doing something solely for myself. The separation from Ryan, however, was not without its difficulties. Despite the legal proceedings, he continued to harass me with phone calls and messages. His attempts to make me feel guilty were relentless, and he tried to undermine my confidence at every turn. But instead of succumbing to his tactics, I found strength in my new surroundings and the support from my mother. My business, which had been a side project while I was married, became my main focus. I threw myself into it, dedicating long hours to make it thrive. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but I was determined to succeed. Each milestone, no matter how small, felt like a personal triumph. I could feel the seeds of my independence taking root. One afternoon, as I was working on a new project, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello. Luna, it's Nina," came the cold voice on the other end. I had not expected to hear from her. Nina, Ryan's sister, had always been particularly critical of me. Her tone was dismissive. "I just wanted to let you know that Ryan is falling apart. His career is taking a hit, and his personal life is in shambles." I listened quietly, my emotions a mix of vindication and indifference. "Is that so?" "Yes," Nina continued. "I thought you should know. I don't expect you to feel sympathy, but I thought you'd be interested." I ended the call and shook my head. The family's drama was no longer my concern. My focus had shifted to my own recovery and growth. I didn't need their validation or their interference in my life. The new chapter was filled with small victories. My business began to gain traction, and I started to feel a renewed sense of purpose. I even began to explore dating again, cautiously opening my heart to the idea of new relationships. It was a process of rediscovering who I was and what I wanted from life. One evening, while attending a local networking event, I met someone who seemed genuinely kind and supportive. His name was Alex, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. We shared similar interests and values, and he seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not just as a potential partner. It was a refreshing change. As weeks turned into months, I continued to rebuild my life. The harassment from Ryan eventually subsided, and the legal aspects of the divorce were finalized. I felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. I had faced countless obstacles and emerged stronger and more self-assured. Reflecting on my journey, I realized how far I had come. The toxic environment I had once been trapped in was behind me. I had taken control of my life, focusing on my business, my well-being, and my future. The emotional scars remained, but they served as reminders of my resilience and growth. In Denver, I found not only a new home but also a renewed sense of self. I learned to value my own worth and to seek out relationships and opportunities that aligned with my values and goals. My story was one of overcoming adversity and embracing the possibilities of a new beginning. As I looked out at the city lights from my new home, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with the strength and independence I had fought so hard to achieve. As the months passed, Denver became more than just a place I had moved to. It became a symbol of my transformation. My new life was far from perfect, but it was mine, and that realization was a profound source of strength and satisfaction. My business had grown beyond my expectations. What started as a small side project was now thriving, and I felt a deep sense of pride in what I had achieved. The long hours and sleepless nights were paying off, and my financial stability was more secure than ever. I had learned to balance work and personal life, allowing myself time to rest and enjoy the small pleasures that I had once overlooked. One crisp autumn afternoon, I received a message from my mother. She wanted to visit me in Denver, and I was thrilled at the prospect. Her support had been unwavering throughout my ordeal, and I was eager to show her the new life I had built. Her visit was a mix of celebration and reflection. We spent time exploring the city, reminiscing about the past, and discussing my plans for the future. During her visit, I invited Alex to meet her. The introduction went well, and Alex's genuine kindness was evident. My mother could see how much he respected and cared for me. It was a comfort to have her approval, but more importantly, it reinforced my belief that I deserved a partner who valued me for who I was. One evening, as we sat on the porch enjoying a quiet moment, my mother said, "Luna, I'm so proud of how far you've come. You've turned a difficult situation into something beautiful. It takes incredible strength to do that." Her words were a balm to my soul. I had spent so long doubting my worth, and hearing her affirm my journey was deeply validating. I had been through so much, and yet, here I was, standing tall and ready to embrace the future. Life continued to unfold in new and exciting ways. My business expanded, and I took on new projects that challenged and inspired me. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. Each day brought new opportunities and experiences, and I embraced them with open arms. Alex and I grew closer, and our relationship deepened. He supported my ambitions and shared in my joys and challenges. Our connection was built on mutual respect and understanding, something I had longed for and finally found. As we navigated our relationship, I felt a sense of hope and optimism that had been absent for too long. Despite the positive changes, there were moments of reflection. I occasionally thought about Ryan and his family and the impact they had on my life. But instead of dwelling on the past, I chose to focus on the present and the future. The lessons I had learned were valuable, and I used them to guide my decisions and relationships. The journey to self-discovery had been painful but enlightening. I had learned to value my own worth, to stand up for myself, and to seek out relationships that were supportive and fulfilling. My story was no longer defined by the struggles I had faced, but by the strength and resilience I had discovered within myself. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the progress I had made. I was living a life that aligned with my values and dreams. The emotional scars from my past were still there, but they no longer held power over me. Instead, they served as reminders of my strength and my ability to overcome adversity. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my new life. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with all the promise and possibilities it held. I had faced challenges and emerged stronger, and I was determined to continue growing and exploring the opportunities that lay ahead. As I looked out over the Denver skyline, I felt a profound sense of peace. My journey had been one of transformation and self-discovery, and I was grateful for the strength and resilience that had carried me through. The new dawn was not just the start of a new chapter, it was the beginning of a life I had fought so hard to create. And with that, I looked forward to the future with hope, optimism, and a renewed sense of purpose. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. My heart hammered against my ribs as angry voices echoed through our two-story colonial. I glanced at my phone, 2:17 a.m. This wasn't their usual fighting hour. My name is Eliora, but everyone calls me Eli. At 17, I'd gotten pretty good at reading the rhythm of my parents' arguments. This one felt different, more final somehow. "How long?" My father's voice cracked with an emotion I'd never heard from him before. "How long have you been lying to me?" I crept to my bedroom door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. Mom's response was too quiet to make out, but Dad's bitter laugh cut through the silence like a knife. 12 years, Blythe? Our entire marriage has been built on lies. My stomach dropped. 12 years. The same age as my half-sister, Zara. She was sleeping over at a friend's house tonight, thankfully missing whatever storm was breaking over our family. James, please, Mom pleaded. I never meant to. To what? To destroy everything? To make a fool of me? Another crash, followed by the sound of keys jingling. I can't even look at you right now. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. I rushed to my window, watching as Dad stormed out to his car. The engine roared to life, tires squealing against wet pavement as he peeled away into the darkness. Mom stood in the doorway, her silhouette small and defeated in the porch light. I should have gone downstairs. Should have demanded answers. Instead, I crawled back into bed, pulling my covers up to my chin like I was still a little kid who could hide from monsters under blankets. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, everything changed. 2 police officers stood in our living room while Mom collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Their words blurred together. Wet roads, sharp turn, no guardrail. Dad's car had been found at the bottom of Miller's Ridge. Mrs. Wyndham, one officer said gently, I'm so sorry, but your husband didn't survive the crash. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the door frame, my knees threatening to buckle. Mom's sobs filled the room, but all I could hear was Dad's voice from last night, raw with betrayal. His final words in our house haunting me, I can't even look at you right now. Hours passed in a fog. Relatives started arriving, aunts, uncles, family, friends. Everyone speaking in hushed tones, offering casseroles and condolences. But Grandma and Grandpa Wyndham, Dad's parents, were noticeably absent. When I asked Mom why, she just shook her head and said they were traveling. Late that afternoon, I found myself in Dad's study, breathing in the familiar scent of old books and coffee. His reading glasses still sat on his desk, next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. A photo of us caught my eye, Dad teaching me to fish when I was 12, both of us grinning at the camera with matching sunburned noses. Eli? Mom's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, eyes red and puffy. Grady's coming over to help with arrangements. Grady Bellamy, Mom's friend from work who'd been spending more and more time at our house lately. Something cold settled in my chest as pieces started clicking into place. Did Dad know? The words slipped out before I could stop them. About you and Grady? Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. This isn't the time, Elira. But it was exactly the time. Dad was gone, and his last moments alive had been filled with anger and betrayal. I turned back to the photo, unable to look at her. When will it be time, Mom? When you're ready to admit what really happened last night? She didn't answer. Her footsteps retreated down the hall, leaving me alone with Dad's ghost and questions that would haunt me for months to come. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months after Dad's funeral, Mom married Grady in our backyard. I watched from my bedroom window as they exchanged vows under the maple tree where Dad had built my childhood swing. The same tree he'd promised to hang fairy lights in for my graduation party next spring. Mom wore a cream-colored sundress and a smile I didn't recognize. Zara scattered rose petals, beaming at her role as flower girl. The small gathering of guests, mostly Grady's friends and family, applauded as they kissed. No one seemed to notice or care that Dad's parents weren't there. That half of our family was missing. Eli? Zara's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in my doorway, still in her pale pink dress. Mom wants you to come down for pictures. I'm not feeling well, I said, the same excuse I'd used to avoid the ceremony. Maybe later. Zara's face fell. But we're family now. Grady says. Grady isn't my father. The words came out sharper than I intended. Zara flinched and guilt twisted in my stomach. None of this was her fault. Sorry, I softened my tone. I just need some time, okay? She nodded and disappeared downstairs, where laughter and music drifted up through the floorboards. I turned back to my window, watching as Grady led Mom in their first dance. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, and something in his expression made my skin crawl. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Zara was asleep, I crept down to the kitchen for water. Voices from the living room stopped me cold. We need to discuss what to do about Elira, Grady was saying. Her attitude is affecting Zara. She's grieving, Mom replied, but her defense sounded weak. It's only been 6 months. It's been long enough. Grady's voice hardened. We're a family now, Blythe. Either she accepts that, or we need to consider other options. What do you mean, other options? My sister's running that boarding school in Vermont. They have openings for the spring semester. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. Silence fell in the living room. Eli? Mom called out. Is that you? I didn't answer. Instead, I ran back upstairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. Behind me, I heard their muffled argument resume. The next morning, I woke to find boxes stacked in the hallway. Grady was directing movers, pointing out which furniture stayed and which went. What's happening? I asked Mom, who was supervising from the doorway. Grady's moving in properly now, she said, not meeting my eyes. We're making space for his things. I watched as they dismantled Dad's study, packing away his books and awards. His presence being erased piece by piece. When they reached for the fishing photo on his desk, I snapped. That's mine, I said, snatching it before the mover could wrap it in paper. Eli, Mom started, but Grady cut her off. Let her have it, he said smoothly. She'll need something for her dorm room, after all. My blood ran cold. So they'd already decided. That afternoon, I found Dad's old laptop buried in one of the boxes headed for storage. I smuggled it to my room, desperate for any connection to him. When I powered it on, a document was still open, an email draft dated the night he died. Mavis, it began. I know why you've been trying to warn me about Blythe. Tonight confirmed everything. I need your help protecting. The message cut off there. My hands shook as I read it again. Grandma had tried to warn him? About what? A knock at my door made me quickly close the laptop. Grady stood there, his smile not reaching his eyes. Family meeting downstairs, he said. We need to discuss your future. I nodded, my mind racing. Dad's unfinished email felt like a key to a door I didn't even know existed. Whatever Grandma Mavis had tried to tell him, whatever truth she knew, I had to find out. But first, I needed to stop them from shipping me off to Vermont. The family meeting about Vermont never happened. Instead, I spent the night digging through Dad's laptop, looking for any connection to my grandparents. My search led me to a password-protected folder labeled Family Matters. After 3 tries, I cracked it my birthday, followed by Zara's. Inside, I found dozens of emails between Dad and Grandma Mavis, dating back 12 years. The most recent ones made my stomach churn. James, the DNA test results confirm what we suspected, Grandma had written. You need to confront Blythe about Zara. And about Grady. This deception has gone on long enough. The timestamp showed Dad had read this email the morning before he died. A soft knock interrupted my reading. Eli? Zara's voice came through the door. Can I come in? I quickly closed the laptop. Sure. She slipped inside, clutching her pillow. I had a bad dream. Can I sleep here? Looking at her now, knowing what I knew, made my heart ache. She wasn't just my half-sister, she was Grady's daughter. Dad had raised her believing she was his, while Grady and Mom kept their secret. Of course, I said, moving over. As she settled in beside me, I noticed she was wearing Dad's old college sweatshirt as a nightgown. The sight made me want to cry. Eli, she whispered in the darkness. Why doesn't Grady want you to stay? My breath caught. What do you mean? I heard him talking to Mom. He said you're too much like Dad, that it's not healthy for anyone. Before I could respond, footsteps creaked in the hallway. The door opened, revealing Grady's silhouette. Zara, his voice was tight. What are you doing in here? I had a nightmare. Back to your room. Now. She scrambled out of bed, shooting me an apologetic look before scurrying past him. Grady lingered in the doorway. We need to establish some boundaries, he said. Zara's impressionable. She doesn't need to be influenced by your attitude. You mean she doesn't need to remember Dad? The words felt dangerous in my mouth, but I couldn't stop them. Or is there something else you're worried about? His expression shifted, something cold flickering behind his eyes. What exactly are you implying? Nothing, I said, but my hand instinctively moved to cover Dad's laptop. Just wondering why you're so eager to send me away. He stepped into my room, closing the door behind him. Listen carefully, Elira. Your mother and I are trying to build something here. A fresh start. If you can't be part of that, there are other options. Like Vermont? Like wherever necessary. His gaze fell on the laptop. What's that? Schoolwork. On your father's computer? He moved closer. Hand it over. No. I clutched it to my chest. This isn't a request. He reached for it, but I scrambled backward. Get out of my room. The door burst open. Mom stood there, looking between us with wide eyes. What's going on? Your daughter's been going through James's personal files, Grady said. Who knows what she's found? Mom's face paled. Eli, give me the laptop. Why? Afraid of what else I might discover. I opened it, hands shaking. Like these emails from Grandma Mavis? Or the DNA test results. The color drained from Mom's face. Grady's hands clenched into fists. How long were you going to keep lying? I demanded. Dad knew, didn't he? That night, when he left, he finally figured it out. About you too. About Zara. Enough. Grady's shout made me flinch. Blythe, handle this. Now. Mom stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Sweetheart, please. It's complicated. No, it's really not. I slammed the laptop shut. Dad died thinking his whole life was a lie. And you're still lying, aren't you? To Zara, to everyone. Vermont isn't optional anymore, Grady cut in. You're leaving next week. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to defend me. She just stood there, silent tears running down her face. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But first, I'm calling Grandma Mavis. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Mom's gasp told me everything I needed to know. There were more secrets to uncover, and my grandparents held the key to all of them. Finding Grandma Mavis's number wasn't hard. It was still in Dad's phone contacts. What was hard was working up the courage to call while Grady and Mom were downstairs, probably plotting my exile to Vermont. I paced my room, phone clutched in my sweaty palm. The sound of Zara practicing piano drifted up through the floorboards, the same melody she'd been working on since Dad taught it to her last year. The thought of leaving her behind made my chest ache. Finally, I pressed call. 3 rings. 4. Then, hello? Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm and strong. Grandma? Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Elira? Is it really you? Yeah. My voice cracked. I found Dad's emails. About the DNA test. About Mom and... Where are you? She cut in, urgency replacing warmth. Are you at home? Yes, but... Listen carefully, sweetheart. Don't tell anyone you called me. Your grandfather and I are 3 hours away. We can be there by... The line went dead. I spun around to find Grady in my doorway, his hand on my room's phone jack. Calling hours are over, he said, pocketing the cable. You can't keep me from talking to my grandparents. Actually, I can. He stepped closer. Your mother signed the boarding school paperwork this morning. You're leaving Sunday. That's in 2 days. Better start packing. I pushed past him into the hallway, racing downstairs to find Mom. She was in the kitchen, methodically loading the dishwasher like everything was normal. You signed the papers? I demanded. Without even talking to me? She wouldn't meet my eyes. It's for the best, Eli. You need a fresh start away from all this. All what? The truth. The past, Grady said from behind me. Which is where it needs to stay. The piano music stopped abruptly. Zara appeared in the doorway, her face pale. You're leaving. No, I said, just as Mom said yes. But why? Zara's voice trembled. Is it because of me? Because I told you about what Grady said. Zara, Grady's tone carried a warning. Go to your room. No. She moved closer to me. I don't want Eli to go. I saw something dangerous flash in Grady's eyes. He stepped toward Zara, but I moved between them. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare try to intimidate her like you do everyone else. Grady, Mom started, but he held up his hand. You want to know why your sister's leaving? He asked Zara. Show her the emails, Eli. Tell her everything you found. About her real father. About... Stop. Mom's shout made us all jump. A glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In the silence that followed, I could hear her ragged breathing. "Mom?" Zara's voice was small. "What's he talking about?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She had Grady's eyes. How had I never noticed before? The truth sat like poison on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. "Nothing," I said finally. "He's talking about nothing." Grady smiled, cold and triumphant. He knew he had me cornered. I could tell the truth and destroy Zara's world, or I could leave quietly and protect her from it. "I'll go pack," I said, my voice hollow. But as I turned to leave, I caught sight of Dad's reflection in the kitchen window. No, not Dad. Grandfather August, standing on our back porch with Grandma Mavis beside him. They must have already been on their way when I called. Grady followed my gaze and cursed. Mom dropped another glass. "Zara," I said quickly, "remember how Dad always said the truth sets us free?" She nodded. "Well, I think it's time for some truth. All of it." The back door opened, and my grandparents stepped into our kitchen like avenging angels. Grandma Mavis took one look at me and opened her arms. I ran to her without hesitation, leaving chaos erupting behind me. Grandma Mavis's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and safety. I sat at her familiar oak table, watching steam rise from my tea while Grandfather August paced behind me. We'd left chaos at my house, Mom crying, Grady threatening legal action, and Zara locked in her room, refusing to speak to anyone. "Your father suspected for years," Grandma said, sliding a worn leather journal across the table. "But he couldn't prove anything until he found this in Blythe's desk last spring." The journal was Mom's. Inside, detailed entries chronicled her relationship with Grady, starting long before I was born. Before she even met Dad. He was going to confront them that night, Grandfather August said, his voice heavy. We begged him to wait, to let us help him gather more evidence for the divorce. Evidence? I looked up from the journal. Evidence of what? Grandma exchanged a look with Grandfather. "Your father discovered some irregularities in his company's accounts. Large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts." "I don't understand." "Grady was your father's financial advisor before he married your mother," Grandfather explained. "He'd been embezzling funds for years, using your mother's position as company secretary to cover his tracks." The room tilted sideways. "Dad's accident." "Might not have been an accident at all," Grandma finished softly. A sharp knock at the front door made us all jump. Through the window, I saw Mom's car in the driveway. "I'll handle this," Grandfather said, moving toward the door. "Wait." I stood up. "I want to talk to her. Eli. She owes me the truth. All of it." Mom looked smaller somehow, standing in Grandma's living room. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting together nervously. "Where's Grady?" I asked. "At home with Zara." She swallowed hard. "He doesn't know I'm here." "Like Dad didn't know about you and Grady all those years?" She flinched. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Grady. He can be very persuasive when he wants something. Like Dad's money? Or his life." I didn't know about the money until after." She trailed off, tears spilling down her cheeks. When James confronted me that night, I panicked. I called Grady, told him everything. He said he'd handle it, but I never thought. "You never thought he'd actually kill Dad?" My voice cracked. "Or you just never thought anyone would figure it out?" "Eli, please. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your mother." "No." The word came out sharp as glass. "My mother died the night Dad did. I just didn't know it until now." A sound from the hallway made us turn. Zara stood there, tears streaming down her face. She must have followed Mom. "Is it true?" she whispered. Did he kill James?" Mom reached for her, but Zara backed away. "Sweetheart, it's complicated." "Stop lying." Zara screamed. "Everyone just stop lying." She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist like she used to when she was little. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Blood didn't matter. Dad had taught us that love was stronger than DNA. "What do we do now?" Zara asked, her voice muffled against my shirt. I looked at my grandparents, then at Mom, who seemed to have aged years in minutes. The journal on the table held enough evidence to destroy Grady, but using it would mean destroying what was left of our family too. We tell the truth, I said finally. All of it. To the police, to everyone. Grady will never let that happen, Mom whispered. He'll what? Grandfather's voice was steel. Kill someone else? Try to send Eli away? We have evidence now, Blythe. Real evidence. My phone buzzed, a text from Grady. Come home now. Or everyone learns what really happened the night your father died. I showed it to the others. Mom went pale. He's bluffing, she said, but her voice shook. Maybe, I replied, already grabbing my keys. But I'm done running from the truth. Grandma caught my arm. You're not going alone. I looked at my sister, still clinging to me, then at the journal that held our father's death warrant. No, I agreed. We're all going. It's time to finish this. The house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. Too dark. Even the porch light was off, which Mom never allowed. Grandfather August insisted on calling the police, but I knew we couldn't wait. Every minute felt like another chance for Grady to destroy evidence, to bury the truth even deeper. He's expecting me, I said, gripping Mom's journal in my hands. Just me. Absolutely not. Grandma Mavis started, but I cut her off. Dad died trying to protect this family. I won't let that be for nothing. Before anyone could stop me, I was out of the car and up the front steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house felt wrong, like walking into a familiar room where all the furniture had been shifted slightly left. Grady. My voice echoed in the darkness. In here. His voice came from Dad's old study. I found him sitting at Dad's desk, illuminated by a single lamp. Dad's laptop was open in front of him, and beside it sat a familiar object that made my blood run cold. Dad's phone. The one the police said they never found at the crash site. Wondering how I got this? Grady's smile didn't reach his eyes. Amazing what you can retrieve from a ravine if you know where to look. You went back that night, I said, to clean up evidence. Smart girl. Just like your father. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I remained standing. Where's Zara? Safe. Away from all this mess you're creating. He leaned forward. You know, James made the same choice you did, choosing truth over family. Look where that got him. You murdered him. I protected what was mine. His voice hardened. Like I'm going to do right now. The front door opened. Mom's voice called out, followed by Grandma Mavis's. Grady's expression darkened. I told you to come alone. I did. I held up the journal. And I brought what you really want. His eyes fixed on it. Your mother's little diary. James was so proud of himself for finding it. It has everything. The affair, the money transfers, all of it. Hand it over. I took a step closer to his desk. Tell me what happened that night first. The whole truth. He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Your father was going to ruin everything. The life I'd built, the future I'd planned. He called that night, said he was going to the police. I couldn't let that happen. So you followed him. I tried talking sense into him first. When that failed, he spread his hands. Sometimes accidents are necessary. Footsteps approached the study. I needed to keep him talking, keep him distracted. And Mom? Did she know? Blythe knows what she needs to know. Just like you're going to forget what you think you know, unless you want Zara to grow up without both her father and her sister. The threat hung in the air between us. I thought of Zara, already losing one father, now learning the truth about another. The journal felt heavy in my hands. You're right, I said quietly. Sometimes we have to protect what's ours. I held out the journal. As Grady reached for it, I let it fall. In his moment of distraction, I lunged for Dad's phone on the desk. But Grady was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist, twisting until pain shot up my arm. The phone clattered to the floor as he yanked me forward, his other hand going to my throat. I tried to be reasonable, he snarled. Tried to give you a chance to be smart about this. Let her go. Mom's scream came from the doorway. Everything happened at once. Grady spun me around, using me as a shield. Grandfather August appeared behind Mom, holding something that glinted in the dim light. And there, in the corner of the room, stood Zara. She must have been hiding there the whole time, recording everything on her phone. "It's over, Grady," I managed to say through his chokehold. "The truth's already out." His grip tightened. "Then I have nothing left to lose, do I?" The last thing I saw was Mom lunging forward, terror in her eyes, as Grady dragged me backward toward the window. Then everything went black. I woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the sensation of someone holding my hand. For a moment, I thought it was Dad, like when I had my appendix out at 12. But when my eyes focused, I saw Grandma Mavis, her face etched with worry. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she whispered. The events in Dad's study came rushing back. "Grady is in custody." Grandfather August stepped into view. "Zara's video and your father's phone provided enough evidence. The police are reopening James's case." My throat felt raw where Grady's hands had been. "Where's Zara?" "Here." She appeared at my bedside, eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry, Eli. I heard him on the phone earlier, planning to send you away. I knew something was wrong, so I hid in the study and recorded everything. You saved us all," I told her, squeezing her hand. A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Mom burst in, followed by 2 police detectives. "5 minutes," one of them said. "Then we need your official statement, Mrs. Bellamy." "It's Wyndham," Mom corrected sharply. "I'm going back to Wyndham." She approached my bed cautiously, like I might shatter. "Eli, I need to tell you something. About your father's trust fund. The one he set up for my college?" "No." She pulled out a familiar envelope, the one I'd seen in Dad's desk the night he died. "This is his letter to you. The one Grady tried to destroy. It explains everything." With shaking hands, I opened it. Dad's familiar handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Eli, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about Grady were correct. I've documented everything, the embezzlement, the threats, the affair. But more importantly, I've secured your future. The trust fund isn't just for college. It's everything I had, transferred to an account only you and your grandparents can access. I knew Grady would come after me once he discovered what I'd done. But I couldn't let him steal your future like he stole our family's trust. Protect Zara. She's innocent in all this, and she'll need her big sister more than ever. And Eli? Remember what I always told you about truth and justice? Sometimes they come at a terrible price. But they're worth fighting for. All my love. Dad." I looked up at Mom, who was crying silently. "You knew about this letter?" "Grady found it first," she admitted. He used it to convince me to marry him. Said he'd destroy everything, the evidence, the trust fund, our family, if I didn't help him cover up what happened to James. "So you chose him over the truth? Over Dad's justice?" "I chose what I thought would protect you and Zara." Her voice cracked. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." The detective stepped back in. "Mrs. Wyndham, it's time." Mom straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready to tell the truth. All of it." "Wait." I caught her hand. "Dad's letter. He wanted justice, but he also wanted us to heal. To be a family again. How can we? After everything?" "By choosing truth this time," I said. "Together." Zara moved closer, taking Mom's other hand. For a moment, we stood connected, 3 generations of women choosing truth over fear. "Mr. and Mrs. Wyndham," I looked at my grandparents. "Will you help us?" Grandma Mavis wiped her eyes. "That's all we've ever wanted, dear heart." The detective cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. We found something else at the house. A recording on James's phone. From that night, my heart stopped. Dad's last moments, preserved in digital memory." "Do you want to hear it?" the detective asked. I looked at my family, broken but healing, fractured but not destroyed. Dad's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes truth and justice come at a terrible price. But they're worth fighting for. "Yes," I said firmly. "We need to hear everything." Because that's what Dad taught me, that truth, no matter how painful, was the first step toward healing. And we had a lot of healing left to do. 1 year later, I stood in front of Dad's grave, brushing autumn leaves from his headstone. The trial had ended last week, Grady got 20 years for Dad's murder, with Mom receiving immunity for her testimony. The recording from Dad's phone had captured everything, including Grady's confession before he forced Dad's car off the road. Ready? Zara appeared beside me, carrying a bouquet of Dad's favorite sunflowers. She lived with me and our grandparents now, her choice after Mom started therapy and moved into a small apartment across town. We were all healing, but at different paces, in different places. Almost. I pulled out Dad's old journal, the one I'd found hidden in his desk after the trial. I want to read him something first. Zara nodded, settling cross-legged on the grass. I opened to the last entry, dated the morning of his death. My greatest fear isn't dying. It's leaving my girls without showing them that love is stronger than blood, that truth matters more than comfort. And that family isn't just who we're born to, but who we choose to become. He was right, Zara said softly. About all of it. A familiar car pulled up to the cemetery gates, Mom, right on time for our weekly visit. These meetings were still awkward, filled with careful conversations and tentative steps toward forgiveness. But we kept showing up, week after week, choosing truth over comfort, just like Dad taught us. Girls? Grandma Mavis called from behind us. Your mother's here. I closed the journal, tucking it back into my bag next to the acceptance letter from Dad's alma mater. The trust fund he'd set up would cover my tuition, but it was his words, not his money, that had guided me here. Mom approached slowly, carrying her own flowers. Her hair was graying at the temples now, and grief had etched permanent lines around her eyes. But there was something lighter about her these days, like setting down a heavy secret had allowed her to stand straighter. I found something, she said, holding out an envelope. In my old diary. Inside was a photo I'd never seen, Dad teaching me to write my name, both of us laughing as I scribbled backwards letters across his legal pad. On the back, he'd written, Eli's first story, about a family of birds who flew in different directions, but always found their way home. I was cleaning out the storage unit, Mom explained. Thought you might want it for your dorm room. My throat tightened. Next week, I'd be heading to college, leaving behind the cemetery, this town, all these ghosts. But not the truth, never that. Thanks, I managed. Then, surprising us both, I hugged her. Zara joined us, then Grandma Mavis and Grandfather August. We stood there, this patchwork family held together by choice rather than obligation, by truth rather than comfort. Later that night, as I packed my room, I found one last surprise, a sealed envelope that had fallen behind my desk. Dad's handwriting again, but this time addressed to both my daughters. Zara sat beside me as I read. My dear girls, by the time you read this, you'll understand that family isn't always what it seems. But here's what I know for certain. Love doesn't care about DNA. Truth doesn't bend to convenience. And strength isn't about never falling. It's about who helps you stand back up. Eli, protect your sister's heart. Zara, guard your sister's spirit. Together, you're stronger than any secret, any lie, any storm. And remember, sometimes the hardest paths lead us exactly where we need to be. All my love. Dad. I looked at Zara, this sister who wasn't my sister by blood, but was my sister in all the ways that mattered. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He knew, she whispered. He knew all along, and he loved us anyway. No, I corrected gently. He loved us completely. Because that was Dad's final lesson that love, like truth, doesn't need qualifiers. It simply is. And sometimes, that's enough to build a future on.
It's been 3 months since the accident, and the reality of losing my mom and grandparents still grips me with an unforgiving coldness. I'm left with a vast fortune, an inheritance that feels more like a chain than a gift. Sitting in the living room, the phone call with my dad replays in my mind. His voice, usually so confident, had an edge of desperation this time. Ava, you need to think about your step-siblings, he had said. I remember my terse reply, why should I? They're struggling. After I lost my job, things have been tough. You have enough to share. His words had sparked a fury in me. Dad, they are not my family. This money is from Mom and Grandpa. They meant it for me, not for your new family. But Ava, they need this. It could change their lives. His plea made my heart race with anger. So could have your loyalty to our family, Dad. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. He tried to argue, but I cut him off. No, Dad, I've made up my mind. Hanging up, I felt a mix of triumph and guilt. I knew my decision would deepen the rift between us, but the thought of sharing my inheritance with the children of the woman who tore our family apart was unimaginable. My friends have suggested compromise, giving them a small part to ease their burden. But to me, it's not about the money. It's about principle, about the scars left by betrayal. This inheritance is a reminder of everything I lost. A family torn apart, a childhood marred by divorce and deceit. Sharing it would feel like invalidating all that pain, like saying it was all for nothing. As I sit alone, the house feels emptier than ever. This decision might isolate me further, but it's a stand I need to take, for Mom, for Grandpa, and for the family we once were. I brace myself for the fallout. There will be angry calls, harsh words, maybe even legal threats, but I'm ready. This is more than just money. It's about preserving the last vestiges of a family that once was, and a stand against those who shattered it. The following days were a blur of cold silences and heated conversations. My phone became a battleground, with messages and calls flooding in from Dad and his wife. They were relentless, painting me as the villain in a narrative I refused to accept. One evening, as I was trying to focus on a book, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dad. With a deep breath, I answered. "Iva, we need to talk about this reasonably." Dad's voice came through, a hint of frustration lacing his words. "There's nothing to discuss, Dad. I've made my decision," I replied, my tone firm. "This isn't just about you, Ava. It's about family, about doing what's right," he countered. "They're not my family." "You made sure of that," I shot back, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. There was a pause, heavy and charged. "I know I made mistakes, but don't let that punish your step-siblings. They've done nothing wrong." I felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it away. "It's not about punishing them. It's about honoring the wishes of Mom and Grandpa. They left this to me, not to them." "Ava, please. Think about it. Just a small portion could—" "No, Dad. I won't be guilted into this. I'm sorry." I hung up before he could reply. The days that followed were a test of my resolve. Dad's wife, whom I never had much of a relationship with, sent me messages pleading for financial help. She painted a grim picture of their life, of struggles and hardships, but her words fell on deaf ears. I couldn't forget how her affair with Dad had shattered our family. My friends were divided on the issue. Some understood my stance, while others suggested I relent to give a small part of the inheritance to ease their burden. "You'll still have more than enough," they reasoned. But every time I thought about relenting, I remembered the cold Christmas dinners, the forced conversations, the way Dad's new family seemed like a replacement for the one he had left behind. No, this was more than just money. It was a stand for what I believed in. As the pressure mounted, I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone, trying to find peace in the solitude. The mansion, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the ghosts of a past I couldn't return to. My decision had set me on a path that I knew would lead to more loneliness. But it was a path I had chosen. The rift with my father and his family was deepening, but I was determined to stay true to my convictions, no matter the cost. The weight of my decision began to press down on me as the days turned into weeks. The coldness from my father's side of the family was expected, but the isolation I felt was more profound than I had anticipated. It wasn't just them. Even among my friends, I sensed a shift. Whispers of being too harsh, too unforgiving, started to reach my ears. One afternoon, as I was trying to immerse myself in my studies, my best friend Emily called. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried a weight. "Ava, are you sure about this? I mean, completely sure?" Emily asked. Her question wasn't just casual curiosity. It was laden with concern. I sighed, feeling the familiar surge of frustration. "Yes, I'm sure. Why does everyone keep questioning my decision?" "Because it's a big one, Ava, and it's not just affecting you. It's affecting your relationship with your dad and his family," she said softly. I frowned, feeling the sting of her words. "They were never really family to me, Em. You know what happened. Why is everyone acting like I'm the one who did something wrong?" "It's not about right or wrong, Ava. It's about what this is doing to you. You're isolating yourself, and it's worrying." Her words were like a mirror, reflecting a truth I had been avoiding. The mansion felt more like a prison than a home, a place filled with the memories of a family that no longer existed. The silence was suffocating, and the loneliness was a constant companion. I changed the subject, not wanting to delve deeper into my feelings. But after the call, her words lingered in my mind. Was I letting my resentment and hurt dictate my actions? Was this stand worth the cost of my peace? The following week, my father's wife reached out again. This time, her message was more desperate, almost begging. Ava, please reconsider. The kids are struggling. They don't have the same opportunities you had. Her words were a painful reminder of the disparity between our lives, but they also ignited a spark of defiance in me. Why should I be responsible for the consequences of their parents' choices? My mom and grandparents had worked hard for this legacy. It wasn't meant to be a remedy for my father's mistakes. As I lay in bed that night, the mansion around me felt larger and colder than ever. The walls seemed to whisper with echoes of the past, of times when happiness wasn't a distant memory. I realized that this inheritance, this vast wealth, had become a barrier, isolating me from the rest of the world. I was standing at a crossroads, torn between my principles and the growing realization that this battle was consuming me. The question haunted me. Was holding on to this legacy worth the cost of my own happiness and peace of mind? The internal struggle between my principles and the growing isolation became a constant companion in the ensuing days. Each morning, as I woke up in the vast, empty mansion, the weight of my decision and its consequences felt heavier. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I decided to visit Mrs. Jenkins, an old family friend and my mother's confidant. Her quaint cottage, filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies, was a stark contrast to the cold grandeur of my home. Sitting at her kitchen table sipping tea, I opened up about my turmoil. Mrs. Jenkins listened quietly, her wise eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. "Ava, dear," she finally spoke, "holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." Her words struck a chord in me. Was I holding on to this inheritance out of respect for my family's legacy, or was it becoming a tool for my resentment? "But Mrs. Jenkins, it's about principle. My mom and grandparents wouldn't have wanted their hard-earned legacy to go to them," I argued, though a part of me doubted my own words. She nodded. "Principles are important, but so is compassion and peace of mind. Sometimes we must choose battles worth fighting for, and let go of the ones that only bring us pain." Her words lingered with me as I left. The battle I was fighting, was it truly about honoring my family's legacy, or was it a manifestation of the unresolved anger and hurt from my father's betrayal? That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with a turmoil of emotions. Part of me clung to the idea of legacy and loyalty, while another part yearned for closure and peace. The following days were a period of introspection. I spent hours walking through the gardens, reflecting on my childhood, the happy memories before the divorce, and the painful ones that followed. I remembered my mom's strength, her dignity in the face of betrayal, and her undying love for me. As I sat by the old oak tree where I used to play as a child, a realization dawned on me. This inheritance was not just a sum of wealth, it was a test of my character. Was I going to let it fuel my bitterness? Or was I going to use it to forge a new path, one that would honor the memory of my loved ones in a way that brought peace, not just to me, but perhaps even to those estranged parts of my so-called family? With this new perspective, the decision I had to make began to take a different shape. It was no longer just about money. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be and the legacy I wanted to leave behind. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of my decision and my newfound perspective began to reshape my thoughts. I found myself torn between the desire to uphold my family's legacy and the understanding that clinging to bitterness would only prolong my pain. One evening, while going through old photo albums, I stumbled upon pictures of happier times before the divorce, before everything changed. Seeing my younger self smiling, carefree, surrounded by a loving family, stirred something within me. It was a stark reminder of how much had changed and what I had lost. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Dad. I hesitated but answered. my heart pounding in my chest. "Ava, I know we've had our differences, but I need to talk to you about something important." Dad's voice was somber. I listened, a mix of curiosity and apprehension taking hold. "It's about your step-siblings," he began. "They're really struggling. Your stepbrother, he's been working 2 jobs just to save for college. It's taking a toll on him." His words hit a nerve. Despite my feelings towards them, the thought of anyone having to struggle so hard at such a young age was unsettling. "Dad, I don't know what to say," I replied, my voice faltering. "Ava, I'm not asking you to forgive me or forget what happened, but they are innocent in all of this. A little help could go a long way for them," he urged. After we hung up, his words echoed in my mind. I was conflicted. My initial decision was driven by a sense of loyalty to my mom and grandparents. But now, hearing about my stepbrother's struggles, I couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy. The following day, I decided to seek advice from a trusted mentor, my university professor, Dr. Ellis. He had always provided me with wise counsel and a different perspective on things. "Ava, it's commendable that you want to honor your family's legacy," Dr. Ellis said after listening to my story. "But sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is by spreading kindness and generosity, especially to those who might not expect it from us." His words were a gentle nudge, steering me towards a decision I never thought I'd consider. Was I ready to let go of the past hurts and extend a helping hand to those who were, in a way, a part of my extended family? That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my mom and grandparents. What would they have done in my place? Would they have held on to the past, or would they have chosen a path of compassion and forgiveness? The decision I was about to make felt like stepping into unknown territory. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about breaking free from the chains of resentment and hurt. It was about choosing a path that could potentially bring healing, not just to me, but also to those whose lives were inadvertently intertwined with mine. The decision to potentially alter the course of my step-siblings' lives weighed heavily on me. However, as I mulled over the conversations with my father, Mrs. Jenkins, and Dr. Ellis, a clarity began to emerge. This was not just about giving away money. It was about breaking a cycle of resentment and animosity that had plagued our families for years. One crisp morning, I made my way to the attorney's office, the custodian of my family's estate. Mr. Thompson, a stern yet kind man in his 60s, greeted me with a knowing look. "Ava, I've been expecting you. Your father has been quite persistent in contacting me about your decision," he said, adjusting his glasses. Sitting across from him, I took a deep breath. "Mr. Thompson, I've decided to set up a trust fund for my step-siblings' education. However, it's important that this is done anonymously. They should not know that the help is coming from me." Mr. Thompson raised his eyebrows, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "That's a very noble decision, Ava, but are you sure? This goes against your earlier stance." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace with my decision. "Yes, I'm sure. This is the right thing to do. It's what my mom and grandparents would have wanted, to help others, but without expecting anything in return." The legal formalities were sorted with precision and discretion. As I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had found a way to honor my family's legacy while also extending an olive branch to a part of my life I had long resented. The news of their sudden financial assistance reached me through a phone call from my dad a few weeks later. He was overjoyed, though clueless about my involvement. His voice, filled with relief and happiness, was something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Ava, you won't believe it. An anonymous donor has set up a trust fund for the kids' education. It's a miracle," he exclaimed. I smiled, a sense of satisfaction filling me. "That's wonderful news, Dad. I'm happy for them," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The decision to help my step-siblings anonymously did more for me than I had anticipated. It allowed me to let go of the bitterness that had clouded my heart and to make peace with a part of my past that I had struggled with. Standing by my decision also meant standing by my values, doing what I felt was right, but on my own terms. It was a testament to the strength and resilience I had inherited from my mother and grandparents. In that moment, I realized that the true legacy they had left me was not just wealth, but the ability to make choices that could bring about positive change, even in the most complex situations. As I moved forward, I found a new sense of purpose and direction. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and loneliness, began to feel like a home again, filled with possibilities and a future that I was ready to embrace. The months following my decision to help my step-siblings, albeit anonymously, brought a subtle yet profound change in my life. The mansion, which had once echoed with the loneliness of my struggles, started to feel different. It was as if the walls, once witnesses to my family's unraveling, were now basking in the light of a newfound peace. I began to invest more time in my passions and interests. The vast gardens of the estate, which had been meticulously maintained, became my sanctuary. I found solace in tending to the roses my mother loved, feeling closer to her with each bloom that flourished under my care. My focus on academics intensified as well. I enrolled in a master's program, driven by a desire to not just further my education, but to make a meaningful impact in the world. The inheritance, once a burden, now felt like a tool to carve a path that was truly my own. In this newfound tranquility, I also discovered the courage to rebuild bridges. I reached out to my father, initiating conversations that were no longer laced with resentment or bitterness. Our relationship, while still tentative, began to heal. The bitterness that had once defined our interactions gave way to cautious optimism. One brisk autumn day, I invited Dad over for lunch. It was the first time he had been to the mansion since the inheritance was settled. We sat in the dining room, where the air was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken, and the chatter was tentative but genuine. "Ava, I want to apologize for how I handled everything," Dad said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I looked at him, seeing not just the man who had hurt me, but also the father who was trying to make amends. "I understand, Dad. We both made mistakes. Let's just try to move forward, okay?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I'm proud of you, Ava. You've grown into an incredible woman. Your mother would have been so proud." Hearing those words, something inside me healed a little more. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about understanding and moving on from the past. As winter approached, the mansion became a hub of activity. I started hosting small gatherings, inviting friends and even some distant relatives. The house, once a symbol of my isolation, became a place of warmth and laughter. In those moments, I realized the true essence of the inheritance I had received. It wasn't just the wealth or the estate. It was the resilience, the compassion, and the strength to make difficult decisions. My family's legacy wasn't just in the tangible assets they left behind. It was in the lessons they taught me, the love they gave me, and the courage they instilled in me to forge my own path. As I stood by the window one evening, looking out at the sprawling grounds blanketed in snow, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had not only preserved my family's legacy, but had also started writing my own story, one of healing, growth, and hope. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with a heart that was now open to the endless possibilities that life had to offer.